Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, inside one of the world's richest royal families, and the secret story of the Arab sheik, infamous for drag racing through the streets of Beverly Hills in his Ferrari.
They're the spoiled rich kids of the Middle East.
Now 2 Americans coming forward in a lawsuit with tales of prostitutes, drug overdoses, and the sheik's demand to murder those who betrayed him.
He told me, I want you to go take care of him.
What did that mean, take care?
To kill him.
The Americans tell their story tonight, including the videos they say show the sheikh harboring a U.S. fugitive from justice wanted in Detroit on murder charges.
It was no surprise at all that he would be harboring a fugitive or associating with such an individual. By no surprise whatsoever.
Plus our shout out for the small-town Iowa newspaper editor whose paper almost went out of business after it dared to expose the shadowy activities of a local police officer. The editor's answer? A GoFundMe page that has now raised almost $100,000.
If you can't stand up for a vulnerable teenage girl, then I don't think you have any business standing near a printing press.
From the Law&Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening and welcome. Tonight, the secrets of a powerful Mideast royal family laid bare in a lawsuit brought by 2 Americans who worked for them as they traveled here in the U.S. and overseas at their palaces in the land they rule with absolute, unchallenged authority. The royal family in the Mideast country of Qatar is the 3rd richest family in the world, and few dare to challenge the ruling leader, the emir, or his relatives.
Brian Ross. Hi, how are you?
As I found out when I approached him as a correspondent at ABC News and was later told I could be imprisoned for doing just that without permission. But now 2 Americans who worked for the royal family in Qatar are taking them on in this lawsuit filed in federal court in Tampa. In particular, taking on the emir's brother, Sheikh Khalid Al Thani, alleged to be a heavy drug user who ordered the murders of 2 individuals in California who he viewed as threats to his social reputation and personal security. One of the men suing is Matthew Petard of Tampa, hired by the sheikh to be chief of security for his family, seen here in a promotional video for a security company that the sheikh founded.
He thinks he's a thug who's beyond reproach and can go after and do whatever he wants.
The other American suing the sheikh is Matthew Allende of Los Angeles, a trained paramedic, brought in by Matthew Petard, the lawsuit says, after the sheikh overdosed on opiates.
He had stopped breathing, his eyes rolled in the back of his head.
How close was it? How close did he come to dying right there?
He had stopped breathing. So it's enough.
At first, both men worked for the sheikh while he was in residence in California, his entourage taking up an entire floor of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills.
There was probably in his entourage maybe a total, in and out, give or take, probably about 50 to 60 people total.
All living in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel?
Correct.
And what was going on there? Who are these people?
Servants, hairdressers, security staff, medical staff, finance people.
And he says some very unsavory types too, prostitutes and drug dealers.
So drugs and hookers were part of a regular routine at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel when he was in residence there?
Yes, sir.
The sheikh was already well known to police in Beverly Hills. In 2015, he was in the headlines after being caught on video drag racing in a Ferrari through the quiet residential streets of Beverly Hills.
One man who lives on the street almost got hit by one of these cars, and kids tonight tell me they're scared to play on the streets.
Get out.
Do you have anything
Get
to say?
the out. None of your business.
He and his bodyguards at the time tried to act like tough guys with the man who made the video.
Get the out of here.
Did you know that?
Get the out of my property.
Okay. There, I'm not on your property. I told him that in America we have the free press and we are allowed to film from the sidewalk, and he said, F America, and threw a cigarette at me.
And then the sheikh later claimed falsely that he had diplomatic immunity to the outrage of the Beverly Hills police chief.
You can't claim diplomatic immunity if you don't have it, and you can't use that as an excuse to jeopardize the public or commit crimes.
They're the spoiled rich kids of the Middle East. That's what I viewed, how I saw it.
He bragged about the incident. Oh yeah, I was racing, through the streets. They've had me on the news, ha ha ha, that kind of thing.
It was a big joke to him.
Yeah, nothing was taken seriously. He felt that he can do whatever he wanted, and he did.
But things got much more serious, Petard says, when the sheikh gave him an order to assassinate 2 individuals, one man, one woman, who he says the sheikh suspected were going to reveal his secrets.
This male had compromising photos of Sheikh at one of these parties, as well as some video and some other things. So
he wanted you to kill him.
he told me, "I want you to go take care of him."
And what did that mean, take care?
To kill him.
Instead, Petard says he gave the man $6,000 to settle the score.
You're sure you understood what he was saying? No mistake here.
Absolutely. The female, he told me to put 2 behind her ear. He jokingly put his hand up behind his ear like this, pop, pop, and bury in the desert.
Petard says when he refused, the sheikh was furious.
He said, "You're not a real Marine. You disgust me. Get out of my sight." And no problem. I got up and left the suite.
But the pay was good at $100,000 a year, and both men traveled with the sheikh back to Qatar as he moved into his palace in the capital city of Doha. The 2 traveled with him wherever he went. This video was shot by Allende in the sheikh's police motorcade to the country's yearly National Day celebration.
We were escorted by law enforcement down to where the royal family sat, where he could go in the presence of Tamim, the emir. It was an experience. You're in a motorcade with a royal family member. You're seeing these amazing homes, properties, vehicles, you name it. Anything that the man wanted, he either had or he'd get it.
The sheikh's passion appears to be auto racing. Allende took this video inside the sheikh's auto warehouse, showing just some of what he says is an astounding collection of expensive vehicles, some costing in the millions of dollars.
The Bugatti Chiron, the version he had was $3.5 million or so.
And the sheikh has his own race car track and racing team in Qatar. Allende says among those he regularly saw with the sheikh at the track was a man he later learned was a fugitive from American justice. This man, Mo Atat, wanted on a murder charge in Detroit involving an illegal drag race that killed a mother and her 2 children in 2001. Atat was featured on an edition of America's Most Wanted.
Every single time we would go to the racetrack, he was there, and he was always either on the drag strip or communicating with Sheikh Khalid. Sheikh Khalid's criminal behavior, it was no surprise at all that he would be harboring a fugitive or associating with such an individual. By no surprise whatsoever.
It wasn't long, the 2 men say, before they grew tired of the sheikh and his shady associations and continued, they say, drug use while in Qatar. But Petard says the sheikh threatened to kill him if he left, calling him disloyal.
He called me on the phone and basically said, "You backstabbing piece of," I don't know, can I cuss on this?
Sure.
You can bleep it out. "You backstabbing piece of shit. I'm going to fucking kill you, bury you in the desert, and kill your family."
Petard says he sought help from the U.S. Embassy in Qatar to flee the country before the sheikh could get to him.
Was that an idle threat, or you think he really meant that?
No, I think he meant it.
In the case of Allende, he says the sheikh refused to let him leave his compound, so he had to try to escape climbing over this 14 to 18-foot wall.
I chanced it because I felt that was a better alternative than being held against my will. I'm not going to be a prisoner to this man. And I jumped, instant pain to the left side of my body, fell to the ground.
Allende says he broke his leg and guards caught him and dragged him back inside the compound and then ordered him to go to the sheikh's bedroom.
Basically, I've broken you. You know you can't if I don't want you to. And that's all he wanted to know is you can't, what he wanted me to know rather was you can't go unless I say you can go.
The sheikh continues to live a protected life in Qatar, his 2 former employees say. He has started his own security consulting business, which produced this corporate promotion video. And the 2 men say he continues to recruit other Americans to work for him, and they want to sound the alarm.
I know for a fact I'm not the only American that was held against my will. He can do whatever he wants. And the public needs to know that. This man is corrupt, and as soon as you get over to where he's the law of the land, he can do whatever he wants.
Over the last few weeks, we've reached out repeatedly to the Qatar embassy here in the U.S. for comment on the lawsuit, but none of our calls or messages were returned. But joining us now is Rebecca Castaneda, the lawyer representing the two Matthews, Petard and Allende. Thanks for being here this afternoon. You're a former federal prosecutor, but the allegations in this case, in this lawsuit, are probably as explosive as anything you've worked on for the Department of Justice, I imagine.
It is. It is as exciting as when I was a prosecutor, absolutely. And in some ways more exciting. Different country, different region.
And you were telling me, in fact, that there are suspicions that people might be following you, trying to intimidate you.
That is correct. As soon as we were able to serve cage holding, I had tinted out cars following me, following my family. They're present outside our home. They follow me on the way to taking my children to school, to Target, daily activities. As soon as we had good service, these people appeared, and they're still following me.
Rebecca Castaneda, a question for you from our control room from executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
So what happens next? The Sheikh is in Qatar, probably very well protected. How does the case go forward?
Well, a couple of days ago, we filed a motion to amend the complaint to include his racing car company. They probably should have been included in the original complaint, but we were able to obtain additional evidence, and we recently filed for a motion to amend. So they have now been added. We are waiting for the ruling on that judgment, and then now we proceed in the lawsuit against his racing car company. In the future, we'll see what happens.
But so far, like us, you haven't heard back from them at all? They haven't responded to this explosive lawsuit?
Other than their response with having people follow me, no one has contacted us.
And is he an absolute authority? Does he have any kind of immunity in this country?
He does not here in the United States. He did not when he stated he did, and he does not now.
We checked with the Detroit police about the Moatat, the man who was seen at the racetrack there, and they say the warrant for his arrest is still outstanding and in the hands of the FBI. Are they aware of what your clients have discovered?
The federal law enforcement investigation authorities in our country have knowledge of this case, yes, and they know who he deals with, and they know what is contained in our complaint and what my clients state, yes.
And has he broken the laws in this country, in your view, with the supposed murder plots and the usual use of drugs and prostitutes at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel?
Oh, absolutely. As a prior prosecutor or as a plaintiff's attorney now, criminal activity abounds in this lawsuit, and as well as what's in our civil complaint. It's kind of like pick your option as to what you. There's so many colors to this lawsuit. Yes, absolutely.
And still more to come, new allegations?
Yes, new ones. We just again filed a motion to amend the complaint against his race car company.
All right. Well, Rebecca Castaneda, thank you for joining us tonight, and thanks to your two clients, the two Matthews, Petard and Allende, for sharing their story with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Next up, the intrigue and conspiracy theory surrounding the deaths of two high-profile federal prisoners just got a lot more mysterious. Tonight, mystery and intrigue as new developments are stoking conspiracy theories surrounding two very high-profile criminals who are being held in federal prisons. It was 1 year ago that mafia boss and FBI informant Whitey Bulger was murdered just hours after he was transferred to a new prison in West Virginia, a prison where a number of the inmates believed they'd been put there by Bulger, known to them as the White Rat. The FBI said it would conduct a full investigation of the Bulger death, but as of this broadcast, no one has been charged with his murder, and the Department of Justice has yet to explain how he ended up in the general population of a prison full of his enemies. And now there are new questions about what happened to Jeffrey Epstein, the accused sex trafficker found dead in his cell in a New York federal facility. Officially, his death was ruled a suicide. But now one of the country's most respected medical examiners, Dr. Michael Baden, says he thinks the injuries he saw during the autopsy are more consistent with a homicide than a suicide. Baden appeared with me and his wife and Law and Crime anchor Linda Kennedy to describe the 3 broken bones he found in Epstein's throat. But does that make it impossible that it was a suicide?
Not impossible, because although I've never seen in 50 years and working on lots of suicidal hangings, that's the most common way people commit suicide in prison. They don't have other means to do it. Is that to have 1 fracture is unusual. To have 2 is rare, and we've never seen 3 fractures in a suicidal
Brian, can I just ask
hanging.
one question?
In 50 years.
50 years, you've never seen 3 fractures in a suicide. It would indicate that it's a homicide then.
Well, that would, but we don't have all the information. For example, is the FBI looking into the corrupted video that wasn't working allegedly when Epstein died? And maybe they found things. If they found something that shows Epstein hanging himself up, that would be more powerful evidence.
The work of Dr. Baden, who was hired by Epstein's brother Mark, will no doubt fuel the conspiracy theories that his brother was murdered by people who wanted to keep him quiet about his powerful friends and the underage girls he recruited as sex slaves. Up next, our shout-out for the newspaper editor in Iowa, whose reporting about a local police officer resulted in a big lawsuit that threatened to put him and his paper out of business. Back now with our shout-out tonight for the owner and editor of a small-town newspaper in Iowa who had to put the future of his paper on the line after he published a completely true news story that even so ended up in an expensive lawsuit. But as Douglas Burns is about to tell us, that's what all too often investigative journalism is all about.
The community is about 10,000 people. We cover Carroll and a pretty broad surrounding area. So we try to be neither the common scold or the blind booster.
The Carroll Times-Herald in Carroll, Iowa, was founded by Douglas Burns' grandfather some 90 years ago. Burns is the infant in this photo. And the pictures on his editor's wall tell a story of a local newspaper with great ambitions. This was Burns in the Oval Office after an interview with President Obama.
With the advent of the Trump administration and some of the fake news tropes, I know our investigative journalism is appreciated, and we do a lot of it.
But the cost of doing those stories can be high, as Burns discovered in a story about this Carroll police officer, Jacob Smith, that began with the tip that Smith was having a sexual relationship with a teenage girl. In Iowa, the age of consent is 16.
So there was nothing criminal with that relationship, but we thought it was the kind of involvement and activity by a police officer that the community should know about, and that most parents would find that kind of would find it very concerning. So we worked on the story. If you've read it, it's thoroughly reported. And the reporter that wrote it is very experienced. So we didn't, we vetted it as closely and as carefully as any story that we've ever published.
Officer Smith resigned even before the story was published and then filed a lawsuit against the Times-Herald.
So I'd never been sued before, and I wouldn't suggest people add it to their bucket list.
In the lawsuit, Smith alleged his reputation has been destroyed, his character and integrity forever castigated in the public eye, and his employability as a law officer severely damaged, if not totally ruined.
And when you began your defense, did you consider a retraction or a correction to get rid of the lawsuit?
We did not, because we felt that we had the story, and that if we would surrender on this, Brian, that it would have a chilling effect on not just other media, but particularly other small media in Iowa. That we, if we caved on it for financial expediency, which I was given an opportunity to do that.
In the end, the judge dismissed the case, finding the article at issue is accurate and true, and the underlying facts are undisputed. But Burns says it took a year and more than $100,000 in legal fees to get that result.
That I knew full well that had we lost the case, that my career would have been over then, and that we would have had to sell the paper then for either financial reasons or credibility reasons.
And now Burns says he's been forced to ask for outside financial help in an unusual move, posting a GoFundMe page seeking $140,000 to cover all the expenses that came out of the lawsuit.
If you can't stand up for a vulnerable teenage girl, then I don't think you have any business standing near a printing press. So this was the proverbial hill you're willing to die on. And, I've been, even in doing this interview now and doing this conversation, or in being involved in these conversations, I have trepidation that because of the spotlight being drawn on this case again, that, it could still hurt us.
At this point, any regrets at all about the decision you made to run the story and to stand up to the lawsuit?
I don't think I could have lived with myself if if we hadn't pursued the story. It was the right thing to do. This is why local ownership matters, because this is my community. I live here. I'm on the Library Foundation. I helped start the Carroll High School Foundation. I care deeply about this town, and I don't want this kind of behavior occurring here.
As of this week, the GoFundMe page has received more than $96,000. Enough to keep going, but certainly not with any frills.
My salary right now is under $30,000 a year to keep the paper going. So there's not going to be any trips in the future or you're not going to have to come out here and do an investigative piece about how the money's being used, because it's going right back into journalism.
And so our shout out to Doug Burns and all the great reporters at his Carroll Times-Herald. I started my professional career as a reporter in Iowa and was fortunate to have a number of editors who, just like Doug Burns, valued integrity and courage over profits. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.